Our last division with plants is the vascular, but it's the vascular plants that produce seeds. So, vascular with seeds. Now, these plants do not require water for their sexual reproduction like the other two divisions, the non-vascular and the seedless vascular. They produce by seeds and not by spores. Seeds are multicellular, and they contain a little baby plant, a young plant called an embryo. That would be the plant embryo. We'll study more about the plant seeds when we do our seed study, and you'll be looking at the little embryo inside some seeds. Now, the characteristic of seed plants is they all have vascular tissue. Obviously, that's why they're in the group vascular with seeds. Now, vascular tissue, remember, is like their circulatory system. So that's transporting the water and the nutrients throughout the plant from the roots all the way to the leaves and vice versa. These plants have true roots, true stems, and true leaves. And we'll be studying about each of those parts, which are the organs of the plant. So there are two groups of seed plants. There are the gymnosperms and the angiosperms. And we're going to learn some characteristics about it and look at a few of the plants that belong in each category. Now remember, they all produce seeds and have vascular tissue. The gymnosperm seeds are produced in a cone. There's different types of gymnosperms. There's conifers, the cycads. Oops, I misspelled that because that should be cycads. The ginkgos, and that's misspelled too. All right, and the neophytes. And these are a pretty interesting group of plants because the conifers, well, the gymnosperms, they include the oldest plant that is known on the earth. It's called a bristlecone, and that bristlecone pine is 4,900 years old. They also have a tallest plant, and that's the coastal redwoods, and they grow up to 115 meters, 365 feet. I remember having the pleasure of being able to go see those right outside of San Francisco in Muir Woods, and also at Yosemite National Park. And at Yosemite National Park, the one that they were showing to me, I forget the name of it, it's like the grandfather or something like that. They were having us look at that first limb from the ground. And they told us that that limb, not the trunk, the limb was 10 feet in diameter. Now imagine that. These trees are so huge you can have several men hand in hand to go around the trunk. They actually used to have one there carved out where it had a road, but it has died. But they do have one cut that you can walk through. So it's pretty cool. So this division is quite unique. The gymnosperms, they do produce seeds, but they never produce flowers. Instead, they produce cones. It's interesting, gymno means naked, sperm means seed. That's actually where we got our word gymnastics and gymnasium. It means naked, because way back in the Roman times, remember when they did the Olympics and all that kind of stuff there, they were only men, women weren't allowed, and they didn't wear clothes. So they're called naked seeds because they aren't covered by the walls of an ovary, which becomes fruit. So they don't, and the key thing to know is they don't form flowers and they don't form fruit. Instead, they have cone or cone-like structures. And here's giving you some pictures of the different kinds. I think these are pretty ugly. I would not want one of those growing in my yard. The neophytes. Now the angiosperms, those are the ones that we like to have. There are more than 260,000 species of flowering plants, or angiosperms, and that's what they are. They're flowering plants. And almost all of the food that we eat comes from an angiosperm directly or indirectly from animals that eat the angiosperms. Angiosperm means covered seed. That angio means covered and sperm means seed. And so the seeds are covered by or enclosed in a fruit which was the ovary. So if you look at the apple there, you know the seeds, the stuff that we are eating is called the fruit. Now also to a botanist, the fruit is also when you eat a green bean. That's a fruit. It's not called a vegetable. Tomato is a fruit. And you can see over there the pea pod with the peas inside. The pod is the fruit, and we don't eat that part, we just eat the seeds. So key characteristics about angiosperms is they do produce flowers. Now a lot of times the flowers may not be known to us as flowers because they might be missing parts like petals. So if they don't have the nice colored petals, we don't think of it as being a flower, because the corn tassels on a ear of corn, that's a flower. But see, we don't recognize it as that. The catkins, which you're finding all over the ground now because they've released their pollen, the catkins of the oak tree, they're a flower. So here's some characteristics that you need to know, that the angiosperms do produce seeds, and they're covered by fruit. They do produce flowers, and you can see there somebody picking the fruit. The fruit grows from the parts of the flower. We'll study more about which parts become what when we look at sexual reproduction and we look at the flower. Now there are some subdivisions of the angiosperms, and this is how long they live, like if you plant them. We have annuals, we have biennials, and perennials. The annuals, as you think of an annual, you get something every year. So if you plant annuals, they grow, they flower, and they produce seeds in one growing season. They're called annuals. Now they may not last all year, it's just one growing season. They might just last for the summer. Biennials are going to last for 2 years. So bi means 2, ennials years, annuals. So biennials, they complete their life cycle in 2 growing seasons. And during the first year, the plant grows roots, stems, and leaves. And in the second year is when they're going to produce their flowers. And then the seeds. Perennials are the ones I like to plant because they're the ones that keep coming back. Although I do use some annuals as well. A perennial plant, a tree is, a shrub is, they can live for more than 2 growing seasons. But there are also flowering plants that can live for more than 1 or 2 seasons. I mean, for 1 or 2 growing seasons. Here's a couple of examples of some flowering plants. I love the bleeding heart there on the left, and the other is an orchid. So flowering plants are also organized into 2 groups, which we're going to talk about when we get to that slide. So here's some pictures of angiosperms. I want you to think, corn also falls, an ear of corn, in that area of a flower. Now here's the 2 parts that we were talking about. We're going to study these again more when we do our seed study. Mono means 1 and di means 2. Monocots is short for monocotyledons. Dicot is short for dicotyledons. And what a cotyledon is, it's the little tiny part inside the seed that becomes the first leaves. And in a monocot, they only have 1. So when that seed sprouts, it produces 1 leaf first. And then we'll look at dicots where they have the 2 leaves. So here's a comparison. Again, we'll learn more of this, and you won't have to know this for the quiz, but when we study them later on, you will. So there's a lot of difference. We're going to be growing, and you're going to be planting my seed study. We're growing a monocot. And that example that we're growing is corn. And then we're growing also a dicot. And so the leaves are different, the flowers are arranged differently with how many petals, the stems, the way the vascular tissue is bundled together is going to look differently, and of course in the seed itself, 1 cotyledon and 2 cotyledons. And those are food storage places. So our 2 main categories of vascular plants that produce seeds are the gymnosperms and the angiosperms. And you can see here some of the characteristics where they're showing you the seed that's naked, the seed that's out in the open there. It's not enclosed by fruit on the left, whereas it is covered by fruit on the right for an angiosperm.